it was an egg, then it was a time thing, then it became half. Let's talk about TW. I've decided to go on a journey. Aldous Sandflys is leaving port. 100 million GP, 200 million GP, 300 million GP, and so on. Hey guys, welcome to another Aldous Journey. Like, subscribe, comment down below, do all the stuff you're doing. But anyway, let's talk about TW and what I learned about TW. TW is in a decent state. TW was was a mode I never did. Never did it in my current guild of 600 million, and really just didn't want to let the team down. I didn't want to have that time-dependent attack, so you've got to fit a certain number of attacks in by this time, and you've got, here's your prescribed counters, here's your prescribed modding. That was just added time that I just didn't really appreciate. However, I always knew that the rewards I was missing out on were quite vital. I was missing out on Relic 9 materials and also the level 9 Datacron rerolls. So actually TW probably has the most gated rewards in it, shall I say. And gated, I'm going to say that they are... You can't get them anywhere else in the game unless you're spending money in crystals. So... Okay, so let's carry on talking about rewards first for TW. Something I didn't like on my journey, something I kind of learned, was that the droid brains stop at the 300 million GP. That's not good. I don't see why, at 200 you can't be getting one droid brain or one, the guilds or the lock-in in the guilds. I think when people are getting to 200 million GP, I think they should start getting droid brains. And let's talk about what a droid brain is. Now, a droid brain is a Relic 9 material, but it's also a gateway. Unless you can get that Relic 9 material, you can't get a Relic 9, obviously. Now, the problem this game has is they've started putting Relic 9 requirements behind things like the Leviathan, the Profundity. Certain kind of characters in the game are starting to kind of require Relic 9. We're going to see it, I think, for Ahsoka as well with Snips. What does that mean? You're basically telling somebody in a guild of 300 million that because they're not locking in at TW above 300 million, you're not going to get one droid brain. So let's look at the average of those. That's an average of 6 million GP. You're saying at 6 million GP, which is probably quite advanced in this game, you're going to have to put, I would say a good couple of years probably into this game at least to get to 6 million, if not more. To get to 6 million, you can't then get a Profundity or a Leviathan unless you're spending money. That's a gate that doesn't need to be there. I think you should definitely drop the rewards down. Let's talk about the game mode itself. Now, we started off in a 100 million GP guild. Banthas of the Empire, great group of people. And we did a TW there. But the TW there, those guilds were strange. Basically, Banthas of the Empire and almost all the guilds we kind of saw at that level had 2 or 3 high accounts and then a very sharp drop off to very low GP accounts. And it was the high accounts that were sort of mentoring, answering questions, helping the lower GP accounts. And those people were then very excited about the game, they were learning. But it meant when you got to TW, you had this sort of strange egg where you would have the high level people would basically block the front zones. And that would mean that the tail wouldn't get to play. Until you crack through that shell of an egg at the front, you wouldn't get to the teams behind it, the sort of soft, yolky bit, which had a massive drop-off. Basically, by the time you got to certainly the third zone back, but even the second zone back, the teams would do a massive drop-off. And I think that's my issue with TW early, is because you're allowing these massive teams, these massive GP accounts, to block the front zone, you're kind of preventing the other people kind of playing the game mode. You know, it certainly is the meta strategy, not necessarily the most fun strategy. So I think when I was discussing it, my solution, I think you should have a maximum number of defensive teams for each account. Offensive, fine, you can just leave that. But I think defensive, you should set it so that if you imagine the front two zones were sort of 22, I think, so 44 zones. I would maybe say three per zone, 4 per zone per person. That's kind of what I'm looking to suggest, you know. And that would mean that to fill 22 slots, you could only put 4 in per person. So you'd be looking at needing to have 6 high-level accounts to be able to kind of fill it with those level teams. I think that would then force people to then kind of be a little bit more, encourage maybe the other people to play, certainly kind of get it more group involvement at the front, and kind of crack this egg meta, which isn't as much fun to play. But once you crack through it, the game mode's great fun. You know, you can just whack in, you can kill lots of teams. The teams get very, very low level, and everyone can then play. So I think that would be my solution. Just to tip the balance a little bit from those large accounts, sort of dominating the game mode at such a low level. So maximum 4 teams per zone per person, that sort of thing. That'd be kind of what I'd bring into that. Then I moved to the 300 million GP. Very, very similar, I'd say. Sort of slightly thicker shell on the egg, but again, it was almost the same sort of crack through the front, clear the back. The second guild I was in, though, Galactic Funky Town, was a great group of people, but very much more around their friends and sort of have a different balance. They were locking in just below the 300 million GP, so there weren't the droid brains there. Other rewards still decent, but without the droid brains, and yeah, it was very, very similar. I would say that the officers, I take my hat off to them. They do an incredible job, you know, getting people kind of excited and getting people kind of into it, and you know, getting the strategy sorted. So really, really important. But it wasn't until maybe I got to the Battalion Bravos guild that I really appreciated kind of TW as a game mode that really comes into its own around, I would say, that 400 million GP. 350, 400 probably, I think, is where the game mode's designed for. And that's a very strange thing to say. You know, why would a guild mode? You had a lovely variety. You had 3 teams, maybe per zone, that sort of thing. A bit of variety in each zone. Had 3 options. You've got incredible Omicrons would go in there, and you'd have the Poggle Omicron, which was great. You've got the Juhani Omicron. You have the Phasma Omicron. All of these things are really take that game mode and make it really exciting. And it's my appeal to CG. Why did you stop? You know, you did an incredible job with Datacrons, with Omicrons, making these characters, making TW very, very different from JC. And that's something that jumped out to me immediately. I would go into battles that I would normally walk all over in JC, but suddenly I would get wiped by a Geonosian team because the Omicron really changed the dynamic, or the Omicrons that I have in JC obviously aren't active. So it makes you really kind of have to do different counters, different things, different teams are stronger and very, very different. So I do think that the Omicron experiment, I'm going to call it that, really was successful in making TW fresh and interesting and actually make it a really good game mode. So I would say around that 400 million GP, TW is great. And, you know, shout out again to the wonderful officers, people like What's Smacking and obviously Moulin Moo, and people who are looking at the guild comparisons, deciding what to go in what area. Those people that are putting those, really, really, they are our heroes of this game. The people that are putting that time and effort in as officers. And they should be probably rewarded in some way. But yeah, I think TW is in a good state up to 400 million. The looming Death Star coming around the corner, obviously in TW, is Datacrons. Datacrons about the 400 million were around about 40% prevalent at the front, 50%, and then kind of dropped off. I can imagine the higher up you go from here, that number goes from 40% to 50% to 70% to 80% to 90% to 100%, and then it starts to go to 100% of ST hands on a specific team with specific modding. So what I talk about in TW with variety, keeping it fresh, Omicrons being really influential, all of that I think disappears and it gets replaced with a single team per node with a single Datacron. And I think at that point you've moved away from where TW was really fun, and you start to move more into, don't get me wrong, I shouldn't say probably less fun, people enjoy this, but you start to get into the theory crafting, right? It's still the same 50 things, but you've designed it in a specific way of modding to make a standard counter a lot more risky than it is, and you've given it certain things in the Datacron. I do think there needs to be a change in TW, more at the higher level. The other thing I also noticed in the 400 million GP guild was the number of teams per area starting to creep in, starting to creep up to about 35, I think it got to. You're hitting the limit again. So we've got to find a way to make TW random, make sure you can't place the same team. And again, I would potentially consider limits. What if you could only put 8 of the same leader into a zone? That sort of thing. Or, that sort of way of kind of preventing this exact similarity, maybe. Forcing people to not place a zone of exactly the same team. That would be a way to kind of get people thinking a bit more, make it a little bit difficult, a little bit different and fresh. I don't know, I'd love to hear from you guys. You guys way more engaged in TW than I am, so please don't take it. TW is not something I really know how I would personally fix, and it's not something that, apart from moving some rewards around, it's a game mode that I don't really think I would look forward to, certainly in the 600 million GP guild, simply because of the similarity, the lack of, it would feel more of a slog, shall we say. Anyway, and please bring Omicrons back. They worked really well, and you just have seemingly given up. So that's the kind of thing that I think one of the reasons why they probably didn't bring the Omicrons in anymore, or they've reduced the speed of bringing them in drastically, is because they were trying to move us across onto Datacrons. But like I said, at 400 million, there's only 40% of teams with Datacrons, and Datacrons are only useful in Relic teams where you've got Relic 5 for a character, whereas the Omicron will work anyway, and it will work even if there's people not at that level. It'll work in different compositions. So I do think Omicrons, certainly in the mid-tier teams in that sort of area of the game, things like Ewoks, things like Night Sisters, things like the Poggle, all of those sorts of, if those, applying Omicrons onto those teams and Phoenix and things like that, really changes those teams, keeps it fresh. So I actually think TW is in a great state from what I saw up to about 450 million. And then I have concerns. I have concerns on similarity and likeliness and the enjoyment level. Anyway, let's talk about that in a future video. That's why I learned about TW. Quite good. I enjoyed TW. TW was good. I ended up going 6 and 4. Got a lot of resources from it. Got a lot of Zetas. Got some droid brains, which are going to be valuable as we go for Ahsoka. So yeah, not too bad. I quite enjoyed. TW really surprised me as a really good game mode. One that was a lot more fun. One that had a lot more strategy about it. And yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Yeah. Maybe it's changed my mind. Maybe not. Welcome to Sandflys. Please like and subscribe. Look after yourself, and may the force be with you. Salute.